So I thought I would take this. Actually, I've been hoping for an opportunity when I could talk with you all a little bit about where we are in the course. Because we're so inundated with new guests and new topics that we don't really get a chance to review, and I thought it would be very helpful, especially in as much as we're going to have, as you know, another writing assignment when you get back from spring break. And I'm going to try to provide a little bit more context for that so that you have a bit more guidance about what we're going to do. Also, I would like to reissue my request for feedback from you guys. I've gotten some very helpful feedback from a couple of you, but I'd welcome more, ways that we might improve this enterprise. But before we get started, and actually I think I might just do this from here. So today, just a little bit of housekeeping. Today is the absolute last day ever for that first assignment peer mark thing. You all have gotten your very specific emails about this. Most of you, as you know, don't have to do anything. You had already completed this peer mark assignment. There were two sets of you, as we talked about last time, who received specific emails from me, and as long as you do what was asked in those specific emails, you'll be fine, okay? So that's, as of 5 o'clock today, that is water under the bridge, never to be revisited, all right? And then I just want to go over, I've said this before, but I want to just, I'm not used to teaching classes to a broad cross-section of students from different colleges, and so I just want to, everybody has different expectations on how they're graded, and I want to be just ultra clear about how we're going to do it. The architecture students are used to a life of existential despair. They'd never know how they're doing, really, because, as we've said, there's not really a clear right answer. And you might say, well, and then how the hell do you grade them? They get graded on a process, as well as a product at the end, but also on a process that they go through. And it's not, there often aren't the same kind of concrete benchmarks that the engineers are used to, right? I got a 78 on one test, and I got an 89 on another. I know exactly how I'm doing. It's not really the case generally in our world. I am going to try to make it as much like that in this course as I possibly can, because I don't want you all to have heart trouble as a result of this course. All right, I want you to be calm and in a position to receive information. All right. So here's the breakdown. Just again, the first assignment, the first writing assignment that has already been completed, is 30% of your grade. Okay. Now we're talking, when I say 30%, it's like 30 points out of. Imagine a perfect grade in this course is 100 points. So the first assignment was 30 points. The second one, the second writing assignment that I'll give to you right when you get back from spring break, will also be 30 points. Then there will be a test towards the end of this term. It'll be before, because it'll be online, it'll be before the exam period. So those of you who are terrified about, can I get away from school fast enough? You'll be able to get away from school very fast. But you'll also be able to take the test. I don't know exactly when it's going to happen. I'll let you know. But it'll be before. You know how they assign an exam date for every class? It'll be way before that. Okay? You'll don't worry about that. Another thing not to worry about. So that's 20 points. So we got 30, 30, 20. And then the final 20 points is simply coming to class and participating. So that's pretty easy, right? If you guys have taken an easier class than this, I think you should report it to me, and I'm going to report it to the authorities, okay? And then, in addition, these peer mark things are extra points on top of that. So you're going to have to deal with the same thing that I have to deal with in the School of Architecture when I deal with high school students who have GPAs over 4.0. What am I supposed to do with that? 4.0 was forever in history the top mark. So when you talk to people and they say, yeah, I have a 4.3 GPA, I don't even know what that means, But we're doing it in this class, because I guess in principle you could actually get 120 points in this class, where a perfect score is 100, all right? Because you can get 10 points for each of the peer mark things, all right? So this is, what can I say? I expect people to do well in this class. And if you don't do well in this class, I think you need to have a conversation with yourself, okay? Should I really be in college? Would be the first question I would ask. All right. Now, Done with the housekeeping. Any questions on the housekeeping part? Okay. I think our last guest, not surprisingly because I know him pretty well, Peter Dixon, was maybe the best presentation we've had in this course. Peter Dixon is a total professional at design. We're going to have many others. Tucker Weimeister is going to be speaking in this class in, I don't know, maybe towards the end of the class. I think it's maybe the third week in March. And he is an unbelievably prolific and successful industrial designer. If you go to, who here has shopped at Target? Okay, Target is a very, is a very design-conscious store, as you know, right? The whole enterprise has design at its core. The logo, the way the signs work in the stores, your experience of going to the store is completely colored by the Target brand. Anyway, Tucker Weimeister has designed a series, and I may have mentioned this to you already, a series of kitchen implements. He's done a lot of things, but these kitchen implements that are called OXO. Have you seen these? A good grip. There's you didn't realize you needed this in many things in your kitchen, right? I go to Target and I think, I didn't know I needed that, and I immediately buy it. And they are comfortable, and I wonder, maybe I don't really need a lemon zester, but I now have one. What's genius about these is not just that they're kind of cool looking, and that they all kind of go together, of course, but that they are the response to a real design issue. Someone associated with this company had a spouse that had developed arthritis. And this spouse loved to cook, but it was getting really hard to grip all these things. So Tucker Weimeister took it upon himself to say, you know what, I'm going to redo all of our kitchen implements, and this will be the solution to that. And they are all ergonomically designed so that you can hold and control them with far less pressure. This is a very measurable thing for the engineers. Very, very measurable. This is not just about taste. It's a very measurable difference in the amount of grip strength that you need to control the implement. And so a lot of things that engineers would totally understand. There's the length of the moment arm, in other words, the lever that you're using to cause something to turn or to lift or something like that is increased in these products. Well, Tucker Weimeister is a legendary industrial designer, and he's coming to the class, in less than a month. So we have had and will have more really, really super characters. But Peter Dixon, I think, has another quality, in addition to being a great designer. He communicates super clearly about the process that he goes through. I mean, the epiphany that he described about going from being a kind of image-oriented designer as an architect, which I must say, of course, we're about the same age, and I totally can really, our life paths were on exactly the same track at that moment. And when he recalls this time when he realized that the buildings he was designing only looked the way they looked because of one person's taste and really nothing else. And that when he then got into the world of what he would call empathetic design, designing things that weren't where you didn't know what the solution was, but where you were trying to figure it out. Tim Love talked about very much the same thing, and holding off the final design decisions on the Boston Harbor Islands Pavilion until he knew what problems he was solving. And it really is sort of transformational. And I think that the most important thing, and the most useful idea that may come out of this course, I don't know. You never know. More incredible, transformative things might come out. But the most useful concept for me that has come out of this thus far is experience mapping, what Peter Dixon was talking about last time. It sounded like everybody pretty much understood what that was, right? In other words, that you can do experience mapping of almost any product or service. It's very easy to imagine it like, as he described, with a hotel, right? Because there are a series of extremely clearly distinct steps that you go through from deciding that you're going to go, I don't know, and I don't know how far back you want to go. Maybe even deciding that you're going to take a trip. There's a lot of companies like cruise lines and Disney and so forth that are very interested in part of the experience is encouraging you to even take the trip, let alone which organization you're going to do it with. So disaggregating a complex chain of events, I think, is really a helpful idea for any of us, whether we're in business school, whether we're in engineering, whether we're in healthcare. We are hosting, the School of Architecture is hosting a group of people in various aspects of the healthcare industry in the next month. And we're going to work with them on how we might be able to, in the built environment, how we might be able to help them, help people, let's say hospitals, or let's say drugstore chains, or let's say healthcare product delivery, anything like this. Being in a class always reminds you how important it is to select your ringtone carefully. Do you know what I mean? I was in a meeting with a provost once, and he was a very dour, serious character, and his phone rang, and it was like a Justin Bieber song or something like that. And I just thought, I can never take this person seriously again. So I caution you to use ringtones that carry very little meaning. They just make noise. Just an advice. You get all kinds of unsolicited advice in this class. But experience mapping is a super useful thing, and I think it's going to form. I haven't written up the assignment yet, but I want to talk with you guys about it a bit today because I think it's going to form the basis for our second writing assignment. I think it's that important, and I'm so glad that I didn't script all this out before we were going through the course so that we can respond to what we're learning together. Were you all as impressed with the experience mapping idea as I was? Did that resonate with you? Yeah. I mean, it really, I think, the reason it's so important is it's a concrete tool that each one of you can use in whatever your field is. We're going to do it with hospitals and how people use drugstores and that sort of stuff. But you can use it in in engineering, if you're designing a product or you're designing any kind of tool, really, anything like that. You break apart how it's used, what it's for. You remember Mark Meyer talked about them breaking down what problems that portable drilling rig had to solve. Do you remember that? He showed us a few. I love Mark Meyer. He's like the most mercenary character I've ever met, right? But he'll use his skills to increase sales for Duncan Hines cake mix among a very specific demographic, if you remember. Or he'll use exactly the same kind of skills to figure out how to dramatically streamline the drilling process by making sure that the right mix of solutions is on the same vehicle in this case, if you remember. Well, I think, now, first of all, I'd like to ask some people who are in business school if what sort of things they might do experience mapping of. Yeah.
I have a consulting company on marketing, so we tend to do, we didn't use that term specifically, but we do a lot of that in order to determine where a customer or a potential customer how they would find a company in order to specifically create a solution for that company. So, for example, a chiropractor company would have clients that find them a lot with word of mouth. So you have to adjust a solution for that specific audience. Or a hair salon would, somebody looking for a hair salon would probably look it up online.
Right.
Look up for reviews and.
But you're going to be able to, I think, be much more targeted and specific about that kind of work if you use this model. And I thought I'd bring this, we talked about, Peter Dixon mentioned how delighted he was that Apple exists, that Starbucks exists, because they prove to otherwise maybe occasionally skeptical audiences the efficacy of this kind of analysis. And I just think it is, I love this kind of thing, because this is how you disaggregate a complicated interaction. And if you're a company, that, and you're a hair salon, if you disaggregate all the decision stages and the ways that you would interface with a customer, then you've broken it into pieces where you can actually address it.
Yeah, and eventually it all goes in the right place.
Yeah.
And you make calculated decisions that make sense. And it's not, I think we should do this because I like it.
That's it exactly. It's about making that which we, who was it? With Marshall Lawson from University of Illinois, Chicago, we talked about creating a context for intuition. And I think I loved that. In other words, remember they talked about the project room, where they posted all the notes about a given project, so that when they went in with the project team, they could actually not have to. They'd have a whole bunch of relevant information and relevant facts around them that they could intuit connections between some of those relevant facts. So let's just take a quick look at this. I'm not going to. So you thought you just went to Starbucks and got a cup of coffee. Ha! What nonsense. Okay? These are the things that you did. First, let's say you were in the office or at home, and you had the idea that maybe you wanted some coffee or that you wanted some company. Right? What is Starbucks? What is their raison d'etre? What is their reason to exist? It's not. Was there a lack of coffee before Starbucks came? Of course not. Right? There was a lack of a kind of consumer experience, a social experience, before they came, and their stores, or their cafes, as you know, are just hyper designed. They're just as designed as Apple stores or anything like that. And it's easy to go in and just say, oh well, this is reasonably tasteful, and it is. It seems reasonably coordinated, and it is. And it seems like things aren't there for no reason, and that's correct. But it's also, it's about, I would say, it is about creating a fictional domestic experience that's better than the one you have at home. Okay? That's the living room I wish I had, with these interesting people in it, And for a society where people increasingly live alone, there's a large segment of the population that lives alone, the idea of going to Starbucks is a vaguely social interaction, or at least more so than being at home. So in any case, they've divided into these 5 big categories: anticipate, enter, engage, exit, reflect. But then, are you coming from the office, from the car, the experience as you walk in, when you're in line, when you're ordering, when you're paying, when you're sitting, when you're drinking, when you're working. Look at how much. I'm sorry that I could zoom in on this stuff, but in a way, it's. And we will zoom in on it. But I think it's important to see the whole kind of map, because that thing that you took to be just a kind of ad hoc decision is actually this complex network of issues, and there are all these different variables in it. So I think the idea of breaking all this stuff down is just super useful for you guys. Whether you're writing about something, this is actually this is actually how you think analytically about complicated things. You have to break them apart and understand them, and then perhaps reassemble them differently. Okay. How about the engineering folks? How would you use experience mapping? What kind of engineering are you studying? Civil? Everybody's civil? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, okay. Like the design of a bridge, or what are the things that you guys have to design as part? Yeah.
I can think of software.
Yeah.
Piece of software, you need to think about how the user is going to start it up.
Absolutely.
See how long it takes to load. Very simple things like that.
Yeah. Oh, well, actually, that I would think design software, but I would think that is a really involved map, right? Because there's so many layers. That's right. I mean, actually, for example, even, just like, for example, is it web-based software? Is it software that lives on your computer? Those are two different experiences. No, I think that's an excellent example of where this is super helpful. But it's not even, actually, in a way, it's not even just if you're designing it or writing the code for it or whatever. But it's also if you're marketing it, if you're describing to others why it's useful, you have to break it apart to understand that, I think. Other engineer thoughts? Yes?
Not exactly engineering, but when I think of experience mapping, I think of websites and how visitors flow through the website. And actually, there's a tool with Google Analytics that actually shows you where people click and where they go from page to page.
That's super helpful, isn't it?
So you can just look at that and think, so what's my audience? Okay, where do I want them to go after they come to the front page? Do I want them to go to the contact page? Do I want them to go to my portfolio? Do I want them to, look at the testimonials, for example?
Yes, yes.
And, this is why you get websites like Netflix, and the only thing they have on the front page is a sign up button. That's the only thing they want you to do.
Right.
And then you have other websites like Amazon, for example, that have a million other things.
Right. Well, that's a great point. I mean, the evolution of websites is really the evolution of different kinds of maps of how you want people to experience things and who the audience is. We're redoing a bunch of websites right now, and if you don't map it according to how dramatically different the audiences go through it, you're going to screw it up. It's going to be great for prospective students, but terrible for your own students, which is how I would describe our current website, by the way, in the School of Architecture. We're fixing it. Other thoughts on this? Okay, I think that, and I will craft a specific assignment and post it on Blackboard and so forth. But I just want you to start thinking already that this is coming. Has everybody filled out the attendance sheet? Are we all done? Okay, thanks. It's like a crossword puzzle or something, and you're left in the middle. Okay. Well, I'm going to leave you guys to. There's tons of, if you Google experience map and experience mapping, you'll see tons of examples. This is just a legible outline of one. I mean, if you just to show you, and so that shows you, how to do it. If that's like, for example, here's a bunch of polling experiences. Like these are actual data points in their surveys, and then these are the comments. In the car, hoping to find a close parking spot, hoping Starbucks is not overly crowded and will have available seating, considering alternative places in case. Notice that there, as you walk in, notice there are people in line. And by the way, you can remember, you've made each one of these decisions, right? You go to, actually, my neighborhood Starbucks, I don't go there very much now because it's gotten too popular and it takes too long to go. Notice the narrow, confined layout. Enjoy the aroma of roasted coffee and mixed, et cetera, et cetera. It's a great question. I'm not exactly sure. It looks like they might be coded in some way, like because this one says 2A. I mean, is there? Is that what it is? Right. But as terms of the. Oh no, they all start with just A. Sorry, it does all start with A. So the answer is, I guess, these are, the shorthand versions of the good versus the bad, as was suggested, and then this is just lending a bit more content to that, I think. But I suspect that there are, and by the way, this whole experience mapping thing, obviously I'm by no means an expert on this, but it is such a clear way to translate what we've been talking about in this course into an agenda. Yeah?
It looks like to me, was it Penny Lee who graphicized the experience, it shows you where the experience is lacking. So the line is the lowest.
Yeah.
The blue is, wherever the blue is lowest, means basically need to improve.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. And then there's some that aren't. Now, I don't know, because I haven't researched this and I wasn't party to this. I don't know how they come up with the metrics for the intensity of the. For example, why is the what does that say? Greeting fate. Greeting fake. Okay. Yeah, but just barely. Like I'm pretty tolerant of fake greetings, I guess, but not of lack of personal space. So that, however they're mapping this intensity, whether it's number of responses or something, they're able to identify those things they really need to fix and those things that aren't really that bad. And similarly, there are some that really aren't much one way or the other. I guess, for example, they expect it to be quick and convenient. That's not a huge plus. It's not a huge negative. Polite is good. Sofa chair is comfortable, but I expect that, right? Do you see that over there? So, you can imagine constructing. Yeah, you can imagine constructing your own experience map with your own criteria, and that's what I'm going to ask you to do. So you can be mulling that over, and we can talk about it more explicitly after the break. But yeah. Explanation of how. Oh, perfect. Well, you know what I'll do? I will send the link to both on Blackboard so that you guys have that just as a reference. But I think that this is like just a super powerful tool. Yeah. The person who's going to stay, right? The ubiquitous Starbucks person with a laptop who's there for an hour and a half, right? Yeah, although I think that is a design question. In other words, that's you get the sense, just in skimming through this, I get the sense that there's a bunch about the Starbucks experience that they want you to have irrespective. For example, are there Starbucks with drive-through windows? There are? Okay. I haven't seen them, but I can see why there wouldn't be as many as there are of some other types, because that when they're talking about you're standing in line, they're talking about that as being a positive rather than a negative part of the experience, as long as the line isn't too long, because they're talking about the aroma of the roasted coffee. Do you know what I mean? These are things they want you to come in and experience. By the way, they also have a bunch of other things for sale. They'd also like you to buy a home coffee maker and expensive to-go cups and so forth. And it would make sense that if their primary thing were speed and cheapness, maybe they'd only have a drive-through window. Do you know what I mean? But that's not it. It's really their primary deliverable is an experience, is a domestic, I would argue, a kind of fake domestic experience. Yeah. Right, exactly the same. And the store originally the store would look the same too.
Right. So there's something about, I meant to ask you, but we just kind of ran out of time, but how you balance between catering towards having a neighborhood feel, but also towards having enough consistency that people will feel alive.
You're barking up the right tree. That is really a challenge, but it's one that you'll remember we talked very specifically with Peter Dixon about the whole kit of parts idea, right? That, for example, when designing these Nissan dealerships, that some would be in a suburban mall, some might be in a city. Remember the Lexus, or is it Lexus? Or Infiniti. The Infiniti dealership for, I think it was maybe in Tokyo or something, but it was in Korea. It was in a dense place, and so their horizontal look had to become vertical, but it actually still had much of the same, it could carry much of the same brand content. At the end of the day, that, and I asked Peter about this whole kit of parts thing, and he said, well, of course, the secret is to have as few parts as you can. Oops. That do as much as they can. You don't want to have what would not be good if you have 45 locations is to have 45 completely different things because you couldn't communicate the commonality of the brand. On the other hand, if everything was identical and the sites were wildly different, it just wouldn't work. So I think that that's a design problem for sure. Okay. All right. Yeah, Paul.
I just think it's interesting because this input graphic isn't considering like a hierarchy in terms of importance in relation to how these touch points relate to each other. Like both in terms of what the goal or the end goal of the business is, like to give you your coffee or to give you a place to hang out and do your work, and it's kind of cataloging these levels of satisfaction in terms of them individually, but that's actually somewhat fragmented in terms of mapping the actual experience.
No, it's a really good point, and I suspect, and obviously, I pulled some of this material together at the last minute today. I wanted to talk about the experience mapping, even if Nathan Feldy was going to be here doing his talk, but I think this is pretty clearly, and we'll find out more as if we read the associated blog, but I think this is clearly an experience map of a brand that already exists. In other words, I would think that there are very different purposes to which this tool could be put. You could use it really to generate an experience. In other words, if you would be established, I mean, basically as designers, you guys do this all the time, or I hope you do, make a list of performance criteria for something that you're designing for the first time, right? To make sure that you have some way to test what you're doing, right? In architecture, we often test what we're doing by drawing, by sketching in 2 dimensions, and then making a perspective in 3 dimensions to see if we're having the experience that we had imagined in our head. That's one way that we test, but the list is a really effective way. As Tim pointed out very clearly, Tim Love pointed out very clearly on Boston Harbor Islands Pavilion, there were a number of deliverables that they had established they needed before they synthesized into a project. Yeah?
What do they do in terms of like an experience map to, kind of push people to buy certain things or push people to be interested in certain things? Like every time like a new product comes out, how does one go about integrating that into the experience map?
Right. Oh, I mean, I don't have secret access to the Starbucks leadership, but I think I can answer that. Which is by understanding, first of all, by not having a vast open area. You go into some, let's say, Dunkin' Donuts shops, for example. It's very different. You go in and there's a lot of open space. Your route, you could take any number of routes to sort of get to the register. That's not true in a Starbucks place. And I notice them talking about the sort of cramped route. You are scripted into a line at most Starbucks that is edged with products. Old favorites, although I don't know that there are that many old favorites in Starbucks world, and new ones. And they can, I'm sure, if they have something they really want to push, there is a very specific location in that sequence that's the best one. Like, for example, one of them is the music that they try to sell you at the cash register in a Starbucks, right? That is it's integrated with the music that you're listening to, which by the way, I've never worked in retail. That must just drive people insane to go to work every day and listen to the same 9 songs. But when they have you and your eyes are actually looking down at the register is when they can sell you the music. So, I mean, I think there are very specific locations that they can, and by the way, for example, how long do people linger how quickly do our lines move? How much time do we have at each location? We don't want to clutter the experience so that there's too much for them to comprehend. If it's spare enough, we can be sure that they'll see that item. But when you start thinking about it like a script, like a narrative, it becomes much clearer. And it's not just a kind of magic. Wow, why does that store have 5 times the sales that we have? It's a mystery. No, we can, maybe we can break it down. Was there another question out there? Okay. Okay. Well, I think this is our big issue today. I want you to also do a couple of other things as we're migrating through this. It might make sense for us to revisit the working definition of design that we came up with in our very first meeting. We called it a synthesis of attributes that allows something to embody its essence. Now, it sounds shockingly vague now, halfway through the semester. But I think you guys have enough ammunition to start crafting your own working definition of design. In other words, you have our 8 words. You've had a dozen or more designers come speak to you. I think it will be very helpful for you to try to reframe that definition in terms that are meaningful to you. Okay. I think another line that we've heard repeated from multiple designers has been that design absolutely solves more than one problem at a time, right? That's kind of like, that's what the synthesis brings you, is solving more than one thing at a time. So I think that's super helpful. I think the notion of design as a higher order of decision making is also very helpful. The metaphor of a river comes to mind, and the idea that design thinking allows you to be making decisions that are farther upstream, that are earlier and determine the course of the things to come. If you only respond to questions framed by others, it's a different order of problem solving than if you help frame the question. And think about it. I just described the difference between management and the workforce. Okay. In other words, if you can add higher value by questioning the question that is being asked, I think you'll be getting something out of this course. With regard to experience mapping, obviously, you want to break apart a chain of experiences so that you can understand it as a series of discrete episodes, as you see here. And I think oftentimes we used the word decontextualize early in this course, and Tim Love talked about it as well. When you take things out of their traditional context, you can sometimes understand how they're operating by seeing them in isolation. So that's what they're doing here. You could say, no, this is all just going to Starbucks, but no, it's actually these 10 different flavors. Okay, all right. I think I will leave it off there. I know some people have to go to an early review, so I'm going to let everybody go early today. We'll try to reschedule Nathan Feldy if we can. We have an awfully jam-packed schedule. I don't know if we'll be able to do it, but in any case, thanks very much, and I will see you next time.